Hello, I'm Sonia Hurley, Senior Director of Product Management with Aris Global, and I am joined today with Jim Hilfrey, Associate Vice President of Product Management, and Laura Jones, Director of Product Management. And we're here to discuss the challenges of aligning global teams with our growing product portfolios. Welcome, Jim and Laura.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
There's a lot going on in the area of global alignment today in regulatory affairs. I'm wondering, what is your thoughts on that? Why is global alignment a challenge for regulatory affairs today?
Thank you, Sonia. That was a great question. So global alignment has been a challenge, I think, going back for quite a while with some of the technologies that have come into play. We've seen disparate systems really kind of come into the environment. We've seen functional areas get built out, focusing really on their particular activities. And then we have the challenge then of growing portfolios, increasing the information that needs to happen across different regions, as well as the different regions being responsible for now the adoption of different changes within regulatory. So I think all those things really do bring in challenges within organizations in order to understand at the regional level what needs to happen from a regulation standpoint, as well as managing the people that are performing those processes, as well as the activities that they are performing.
I would agree. I think also, trying to get that cross-functional collaboration becomes even more of a challenge, right? Because, not only are you dealing with, the different regulations in each country and, the affiliates, but then you throw in, I need help from clinical. And then on top of a global level, I need help from clinical. Who is that, right? Who is the person that I need to contact about this item? Becomes more and more difficult, especially the larger the organization is.
It makes
Absolutely.
sense. Makes sense. And from what you've seen, what added pressures are growing portfolios placing on these global teams?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of shifts, I think, as far as the different activities that these teams are performing, the importance of these portfolios, their growth for organizations, the ability to be able to release new therapies into different markets. So all these different regulation changes, different pressures that are on service providers as well as sponsors themselves in order to work together, in order to facilitate the dissemination of information, the logistics associated with any trials, all the way through drug distribution. Really, again, to try to get the appropriate therapies to the appropriate markets when they need it the most. So I think those pressures are really there. We've seen a lot of that with COVID coming in play. So really just the ability to react to the market, react to changes that are happening within the global population, and being able to perform the activities that are necessary for particular regions, as well as meet all the regulatory requirements for those regions to make sure that we are able to distribute those therapies to the right place at the right time.
Absolutely. And I think it's definitely driven a change in our thought processes, right? Of where we can start reusing, repurposing across the board, right? From the data to the documents to the people, to the effort, to the processes, right? Where can we start streamlining that, across our portfolios to start being able to leverage that information again, as opposed to recreating the information over and over, which is
Uh,
our old thinking, right? That's definitely been a mind shift.
Absolutely, a definite shift towards sort of core packaging, and then affiliates picking up those course packages and making the appropriate changes that are needed to manage applications within their own particular region.
Very good. Yeah. And that resonates with me. Now, how can automation impact or resolve these challenges?
Yeah,
Laura,
that's been a huge data, right? Data is my passion, right? Many companies are coming up with these data lakes, data pools, ways that we can start, truly sharing the same data and the same systems across the organization, right? Across the entire company. Again, back to what we were talking about originally, the systems were so disparate, from affiliate to even level to the regulatory, headquarters, not to mention, clinical safety, these are all disparate systems. And now we're realizing that we have to pull these together and start tying them together, right, in an automated way, using AI, right? That's the new buzzword, using our automation, intelligence automation to start pulling together that information is really going to be key for us to be able to do this moving forward.
Yeah, really the logistics associated with moving the information and the data between the core and the affiliates, understanding really where that process is, the given status of any artifact that's being generated to support an application. All that stuff is really hard to keep your head around. Traditionally, we've seen that managed outside of systems. As Laura mentioned too, you're dealing with a whole bunch of different systems. So the key really here is to, pull everything together, understand where things are doing, who's doing what, when, where, how, and why, in order to really provide some efficiency in the flow of your data and your content that's being generated, in order to ensure that the appropriate people are receiving the appropriate information at the right time. And the overall organization has visibility into the status of builds and delivery.
Right, and automating regulatory intelligence, right? That's another new direction that we're moving in regulatory, starting to automate that intelligence so we can start making those prescriptive and predictive, decisions around our product and have that driven through automation. Right? We really need to get to that point to where we can make quicker decisions and pivot on a dime if necessary.
Absolutely, Laura. Regulatory intelligence is definitely our future. Now, I wanted to ask you both, what else? What's on the horizon from a regulatory standpoint that's going to require global alignment of teams?
Yeah, well, I think most definitely the obvious is IDMP and the regulations that are coming out of Europe at this particular point. We don't think by any means it will stop just in Europe. We think this is just the next phase of adoption and move from more of a content-oriented static perspective when it comes to applications to much more of a data and analytical standpoint. And then we'll see further with that with the adoption of 4.0 for ECTD, more of the two-way communication. So we're really going to end up in a much more dynamic space moving forward. So I think that really that's going to require a much better alignment across affiliates, across the core organizations to really understand what those regulations are, being able to react to changes and regulation changes a lot faster than we ever really had to do in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. Everything's moving more and more towards data driven, right? Everything from, our clients or our customers, needing to get real world evidence, right? And finding ways to automate that, needing to be more and more data driven, to the point of ECTD 4.0, right? Getting more and more granular, which forces us again to keep looking at the reuse and repurposing across the systems and across the applications. Now that we're moving more and more towards that data, and I think we're actually moving into it faster than perhaps the regulations are. I think we're definitely also at a pivot point, right, where we are driving regulations somewhat, went much more than it used to be, where the regulations drove us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as things start to shift further and further into that new paradigm, we're going to really see the industry starting to drive a lot more of these regulation changes, which I think is really positive. I mean, really, you've seen a reaction happening within the industry, a drive from different regulations, adopting different initiatives, different timing, different sort of flares of those initiatives. When we see that shift in that value chain happening within the industry, and realizing the value of connecting data globally, cross-functionally, and the ability to take that data and compile that into the content rather than sort of the approach we've taken in the past, which is we provide data as necessary, content as necessary, and then manage it from that level. Once you really break it down into the data level and start to build it from the ground up, you definitely have a lot more capabilities that are at your footstep in order to be able to manage that information, where it's going, control that information where it's going. But you also do end up with challenges with trying to keep your head around in your processes around that data and controlling it too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim and Laura, you speak a lot about being able to react to changes and the importance of being able to pivot. So this brings me to my last question. So how do these global teams stay on top of this changing regulatory landscape?
Laura, you want to field this one?
Sure. Wow, it's definitely a challenge. I think, just putting more resources and intent into, the data and being able to pull the appropriate data and pull it together cross-functionally. I think, a lot more effort and energy going into regulatory intelligence, and the automation around that. A lot more AI coming into play to start pulling that information, that data. Right. I mean, even the data points for ECTD, the required metadata components keep changing. I mean, they're going to keep changing, right? And get some sort of automation, build and vision on that to start making up a more automated process. I think is going to be key in being able to move forward quickly in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I think global teams staying on top of this landscape, it really does start with each of the affiliates and really becoming aware of the different regulations, translating them into actionable intelligence, and providing the type of technology that's available in order to be able to consume those changes and really convert that into actionable data that can drive processes. That's really where we'll see a lot of the big moves happening in order to be able to really manage all those different nuances between the different regions and manage all those changes and be able to react to them accordingly.
Absolutely. Makes sense. That's it for us today. I thank you both. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jim, for joining me today.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Have a good rest of your day.
You
All
too.
right. Thank you.
Bye from Eric G.